Columbia has now ruled on some of these student protesters who seized Hamilton Hall during last year's protest. Now, just so everyone understands where my position is with protesting, I don't have a problem with people protesting outside of Trump Tower. I don't have a problem with people protesting outside Columbia. But when you take over a private building and you bar other students from going to class and you damage property and you put security officers in the hospital, that's not free speech. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that I know that a lot of people are trying to make this Mahmoud thing a free speech thing, but it quite frankly isn't, in my opinion. I'll explain why. I think you may disagree with me, Hannah Claire, and maybe the viewers will too. But Columbia University has now not only expelled students, some of the students that took place in that, but they took back their degrees. So they took back whatever degrees they had achieved at Columbia, and they expelled them. To me, hilarious. Absolutely, positively support it. You see this, Columbia University just announced that they've expelled, suspended, or revoked degrees from students who seized a building during anti-Israel protests last year. I believe that is correct. I also believe that that's because Trump started saying, hey, we're going to turn off the federal nipple unless you get this stuff in line. Hannah Claire, what do you make of this? Are you okay with the... I imagine you're okay with getting suspended for hostility taking over a building. But where are you about revoking diplomas?
Revoking the diplomas is funny to me because they held that threat of like you can't walk at graduation or get your diplomas for a while over the other people. Oh, it's just my show now. I assume Chad is still there, but the Columbia students are an interesting case because there were so many people who supported them. They had their like alternative graduation. They did all kinds of stuff. And then, hey, what's up?
Yeah, that was on my end.
Okay. I was wondering, I was making all kind of side comments. I don't know if Chet could hear me, but
couldn't. Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying was Columbia is so funny because they threatened to like keep people who were participating from graduation because it was in the spring of last year. They threatened their degrees. Some of them ultimately got them like over the summer in review. Retroactively taking away the degree sounds sort of stupid to me. I'm not against it. But like hypothetically,
you bought it.
If you did all the schoolwork, you pay the tuition fees. Like, I guess the last part is the certificate, but like, you don't make them unlearn whatever they hypothetically learned. Like, if you're an engineer, like you still have the skills of being a 4-year bachelor's degree. But I think Columbia has the right to respond to protests. That's what bothers me. Like, I think protests are a part of free speech. I think that protests outside of Trump Towers, protests outside of Columbia, whatever, those are options. Like, those should be something that we allow as a society in a sense. On the other hand, I don't think that Columbia has to roll over and take it. I don't think that Trump Towers has to let people, break the glass on their building just because they're protesting. Like, I am protesting is not an excuse to not have consequences. And that's sort of how I feel like the protesters involved in this specific demonstration are acting. Like, they want it to be like, well, we were protesting for a good cause. And so therefore we should have been able to have this encampment. We should have been able to take over this building. Like, we were in the moral right.
Yeah.
And I am not going to debate whether or not they should be protesting for this cause. That's their decision. I just don't think that Columbia has to then be like, oh, well, no, there's no consequence for you. Like, when you choose to protest, you take a risk, right? And we talked about this when we talked about Khalil getting arrested earlier this week. Like, surely he knew that by becoming kind of the face of this protest, he was risking something.
I legitimately, just so chat knows, I don't care. I said this Monday. I said this Friday. Mahmoud or whatever his name is can go dodge bombs in Syria or Palestine. I don't care. Catapult him out of here. It is now I'm not a judge and I don't have any power to do it, but it's just my opinion. I believe his job here was to radicalize overweight white women who are from rich families. And he essentially ran I won't say a terror cell, but he ran a cell of people who were damaging property, assaulting people, storming buildings. None of those things are free speech. And sorry, bud, if you're an American citizen, or you were born here, I think he's I don't know if he's technically a citizen or just a green card.
He's
I don't
a
know.
green card. He's a permanent resident.
Yeah, I don't care. He can go. I won't lose a wink of sleep over basically a terrorist recruiter in our country. People forget, like, this dude and his people were distributing Hamas and Hezbollah propaganda at the school. Like, you gotta go. I don't care, and I'm willing for somebody who's like, Jeremy, that's an anti-free speech take. I'm okay.
Why is it an anti-free speech take?
I don't know, and I don't care. He's got to go. Like, that's what I mean. Like, some people
is not without consequences. That's part of it. Like,
yeah. He doesn't have to be in. There is basically, with a green card, he can go for any amount of reasons. I don't have to legal. I talked about this in my standalone video. The law of defense, or a popular lawyer YouTuber shared like a PDF document that basically said, like, the U.S. doesn't have to justify getting him out. Like, he's here on a green card, and he's here as our guest. And I don't really care. And as far as, let me ask you this: if the students who lost their diplomas were here on scholarship, does that change your opinion on losing the diploma?
No,
or do you still think it's like a bridge too far?
To me, this is Columbia's prerogative. Like, Columbia is an institution. Yes, they are certified with whatever national bureaucratic board or whatever, but like, you pay Columbia, or you ask Columbia to give you money to go to their school. You get the degree. You then probably sign like the student code of conduct or whatever thing they have. And then you go to get the degree, and Columbia gives you the degree. So it's Columbia's degree to give or take away. Now, again, I stand by, like, it is kind of funny that if you train specifically for 4 years, it's like people talk about this with like immigrants who are like trained to be doctors, but we don't recognize their medical school. And so then they like drive a cab.
They become a taxi driver. Yeah.
But they have the skills, right? Like, nothing takes that away. So like, Columbia taking away their degree doesn't change like if they learned anything.
I think if that had happened to me,
I don't think that it's Columbia's obligation to continue to honor their degrees if it doesn't want to. It's their thing to give or take away.
I'm sure that these students could probably just still put it on their resume, and then it's up to the employer if they're actually going to investigate whether or not you got a degree. Maybe they call Columbia and say, "Oh, we don't recognize that degree," and it's up to the employer, which is going to be some, NGO anyway, so they're not going to care. And like, I'm a big fan of, there was an article this morning that it's like 50 or 60 more universities are now under investigation. Here's what I think. This isn't a unique idea. A lot of people think this, but there is a very real radicalization pipeline at our universities. Now, perhaps it's not radicalizing them to do some of the things that, radicalize a guy to drive down, the main street in New Orleans, but it does radicalize them. And what happens after that, we don't really know yet. There's been a whole crop of, like, for the last 8 to 12 years. So these people would all be in like their 30s and 40s. Like, how many of them now converted to Muslim and joined a Muslim church, and they're going to get radicalized from there? Like, we know that happens. The guy from Texas was radicalized in a mosque. And when the mosque was questioned about it, they sent out an email to all of their worshipers and said, don't help the police. So, and we know that this happens. And so I don't care if these universities want to allow, people with radical politics or radical political opinions on their campuses who are American citizens, but I do care if they get federal funding. Right. So if Columbia wants to have all this nonsense go on at their school, that's their choice, but you don't get a $1.1 billion from the United States government. Like, you just don't. And I think that that's a very reasonable middle of the road position to be in.
Well, and my general opinion on a lot of federal funding already, which is that, like, the federal government subsidizes kind of colleges by issuing, the federal government's responsible for
research
over 90%.
Grants.
Research grants, but also over 90% of student loans. And so the federal government is like, here, Americans or whoever take out these crazy loans you can't go bankrupt on, give them to this institution that we are also funding, and then go into financial debt. Like,
yeah, right.
Their involvement on all sides of this, to me, like if you were a business, you wouldn't be allowed to do this, right? Like this.
Yeah, only the government.
Broken marketplace.
Yeah, only the government could pull this off, and there's a lot of businesses that only the United States government could actually do. You know, like government, and you know, I don't care. Like, I don't care that you're expelling these students. I don't care that you're taking their diplomas away. There's a big push now. I think they talked about Trump student visas. I'm for it. I'm 100% for it because I believe so. Rubio says the United States is set to revoke more student visas in coming days. I think if you're from Syria, Palestine, Iraq, Afghanistan, any of those countries, you shouldn't get a student visa. I'm totally comfortable saying that. You can call me Islamophobic all you want. It doesn't change what I said. Like,
I just don't think we have an obligation to issue student visas.
We don't.
And I'm going to be totally transparent, which is that like my dad and his twin brother came to the US as like from England on a student visa on Fulbright scholarships. Like, it's not that I have no experience with this or no direct connection. I just think that like
Elon got a student visa.
Right. Like the idea that like, because we've always issued them, we should continue to issue them. Now, I have empathy for someone who legitimately worked really hard, wants to be here, you know, like there are cases like that. On the other hand, I can't just be like, well, there's one sob story, so therefore the system must continue all the time. That doesn't seem logical to me. There are so many American students who are disenfranchised by our college system, who aren't given the same opportunities. In a large part, yes, a lot of student visas get scholarships, but also I know from my experience with private educational institutions, sometimes student issues
student visas.
A student visa is issued to someone that the university has accepted because they know they can pay the tuition in full.
Right.
And so it's to balance the books. So like, and then we continue to have our inflated, overpriced college system that's not working for anybody. Like all of these things prop up what I think is a broken system. I love school. I went to college. I have a bachelor's degree. Again, I thought it was a great time.
I have a master's degree. No big deal.
Yeah, well, see, I'm really dumb, but like it's not that I hate college. I was grateful to get to go, but I don't think it's a system that is built on a strong foundation that is actually advancing the interests of Americans.
Well, it's also like, it's a business.
I don't care about student visas. I care about the Americans.
Yeah, so like we could talk about the worth or worthlessness of college because I think college is probably attended by 40 to 50% too many people. And like trade schools are underattended. Like 4-year schools are overattended. Trade schools are way underattended. And we need to move to a society where there are specific training programs and not these like catch-all 4-year universities. Yeah. Because I can tell you this, I learned barely anything during my first 4 years of college, but my master's program, I learned everything I needed to know. But I had to spend $200,000 to get there. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm definitely in favor of like HVAC schools. We do this with trades, HVAC, plumbing, nursing. We do this more now with. We should also do this with hard sciences, and we should do this with technology. Like we should be honoring if somebody wants to learn to do Python programming or JavaScript or whatever, or PHP or whatever it is that they want to do, or work in really AI. We should just have AI universities. Right. There's no value in me paying $25,000 a year to learn about, you know, ancient Egypt's art when I have no interest in that degree. So the whole thing is ridiculous. But to wrap up the woke students FAFO, like no tears shed. And I don't think we should be issuing any student visas, at least not to nations that are, you know, 40% terrorist. I mean, like, I feel like this is not a crazy thing to say. Let's go to, go ahead.
Student visas should be like rare. That should be something that
you should be like a 140 IQ to get one.
And I just don't, again, like I said, I think colleges want them so someone is paying full price tuition. And like, I just don't want to be a part of this. That's a broken system. Stop propping it up.
Well, you could also go down the rabbit hole of who's paying for those scholarships too. Because let's be clear, none of these H-1Bs for the most part nowadays are coming from the kind of households that can afford $80,000 a year at Columbia. Somebody else is paying for that Palestinian or that Syrian to come over here and radicalize people. And that's a whole nother conversation, I think. I become kind of like a little more hardline about this stuff.